afternoon. My name's Darrell Wheeler, and I again have the pleasure of serving as the 9th president here at the State University of New York, New Paltz. I'm joined today by
Nathan Benitez, class of 2023.
Elise Reitzma, class of 2024.
And briefly, we want to touch on a couple of key issues that students raised during the President's Office Hour. One is on the contemplative space and the way in which the plaques with names of former slave owners appeared and how that kind of caught you off guard. And also the two bookends of students who were here when those plaques went down and then new students who weren't. So why don't we dive in right away and ask you to kind of recapture some of those two questions that you raised during our meeting. Who wants to start?
You want to go first?
Yeah, sure, I can start. So really, when I had seen the plaques up, myself along with a lot of other students in my year were taken aback, very much because, you know, this was something that we had fought for, that students that had just graduated fought for, and it felt as if that fight was gone or it didn't matter anymore, when really it was a matter of misunderstanding, of not knowing, of miscommunication, I would say. And yeah, I think as someone who's been here since and has known the names of the buildings prior to the change, I was really wondering, why was this done without being acknowledged? Why was it put up? I understand the reasoning for the space. I understand why those stones are there and the benches, you know, of course, and it's an acknowledgement, but it was really just the lack of a response, or the lack of an acknowledgement of it, that really took it as, oh, they're just putting it back up to please the people that wanted it back up.
Okay.
That's what it felt like.
Sounds good. And the other side of that?
I kind of represent the people who weren't there when the original names on the buildings were up and functional. And the confusion just based on not quite knowing the history and not quite knowing where the contemplative space area idea even came from, and why these plaques were suddenly here, why the construction was even up in the first place last year. You know, it was kind of a main route to the dining hall, and all of a sudden all this blue tarp was up. So, you know, for students who are coming in, who are juniors, sophomores, freshmen, who might not know what exactly the reasoning for the contemplative space, you know, was, why it's here, what it is, and yeah.
Great opportunity. So I want to take this again. I don't want to take up a lot of your time, and I know people are going to be watching us at some future point, so we want to keep it succinct. But first of all, information and how we convey that is critical. So, oops, my bad, our bad. You know, what really happened was a lapse in communication. That the benches at the contemplative space, we all know, is near the gunk and the bridge that goes over to the main dining hall, was designed back in 2018 and then implemented in 2019-20 as a space to remember and to provide an opportunity for us to recognize the three groups that were part of the original space. Those are former slaves, former slave owners, and First Nation people. The design and the discussion in those years really recognized that we wanted a space that didn't erase history, but actually put it in a context in which we can come together and really reflect on the complexities of that. Now, there are benches over there, and those benches have been broken twice. The vendor came back in to replace the benches and at the same time put the plaques up, which were designed to be there, but shouldn't have been put up until we were ready to launch the space. So that was the lapse in communication. So it wasn't an opportunity to kind of bait and switch and to tell people that we weren't recognizing them. So you're a point on that we have to do a better job in communicating. For students who weren't here, it's really important that we do things like this today to be able to have discussions and show how you can raise issues, how, as a president, I personally want to be available to hear and to discuss what your concerns are. But we will be covering the plaques or removing them. If we remove them now, it's kind of, I understand there's some knobs or some metal that'll stick out, so they'll probably be covered. And there'll be a QR code placed over them that'll redirect people to more more content. There's about a 140-page document on the contemplative space that goes into the history of why it existed and what it's intended to do. We are working with our First Nation partners. We're working with our Black Studies Department, the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, to make sure that we commemorate correctly each of the other two groups, the former slaves and the former slave owners, who are part of this triadium of individuals and groups and communities that we want to commemorate. But when the space is fully done, there will be a very rich and deep discussion, probably driven by a lot of content that we collectively develop. But for the short term, what we wanted to do today was to make sure that we shared with our community that this was a miscommunication and not an attempt to bait and switch and to devalue the great work, and also to make sure that future generations who weren't here are knowledgeable about that. We understand that there are going to constantly be issues that emerge on our campus, but as I often say, it's not the mistakes that you make, it's the lessons you learn from them. So enhancing our ability to communicate and to do it directly, honestly, and towards mutual beneficial outcome is what I'm interested in doing. So hopefully this won't be the end of our discussions, but I thank you for raising the questions.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you for taking this time.